She was just a cleaning lady, until her notes made a millionaire marry her. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain fell hard against the windows of the 32nd floor, streaking the glass in blurred rivers. Inside the skyscraper's gleaming executive suite, the air was still, too still for the young woman holding a mop in her trembling hands. Her name was Sofia Alvarez, 24 years old, daughter of immigrants, juggling 2 part-time jobs and community college night classes. Her life was a balancing act between exhaustion and hope. Tonight, she was only supposed to clean the conference room. Yet fate had other plans. As Sofia bent down to pick up a dropped pen, she noticed a heavy leather folder left behind on the long mahogany table. Its golden letters read, Parker and Steele Holdings. She hesitated. Her supervisors had always told her never to touch executives' belongings. But beside the folder was a scattered pile of sticky notes, words scribbled in a hand that looked rushed, almost frantic. Sofia's eyes traced them before she could stop herself. Revenue projections, shallow loyalty, trust cannot be bought. Another read, leadership without integrity is nothing. They were not just reminders. They looked like someone's raw confessions. And in a sudden impulse, she picked up her small notepad, the one she always carried to practice English, and jot down thoughts and wrote a single line. Sometimes the bravest choice is to stand alone, and people will follow. Oh. She placed the note neatly on top of the folder and left, her heart racing as if she had just committed a crime. The next evening, the man who found it was Alexander Steele, a 33-year-old self-made millionaire, co-owner of the empire that bore his name. He was tall, with sharp features and an expression that rarely betrayed emotion. To the board, he was the ruthless strategist. To the press, the untouchable playboy. To his family, the heir who never had the luxury of mistakes. But when Alexander opened the folder and saw the stranger's handwriting on that scrap of paper, he froze. Something about the sentence struck deeper than any financial forecast or legal memo he had read that day. He kept the note, and he wanted to know who had written it. 3 nights later, their paths crossed again. Sofia was mopping the marble floor in the lobby when she nearly collided with him. He stopped, his gaze lingering on her face, then drifting to the worn notebook sticking out of her apron pocket. You, he said, his voice low but steady. You left something in my office. Sofia's cheeks burned. I only wrote a note. I am sorry, sir. I should not have. Alexander raised a hand, silencing her apology. For the first time in years, there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. You should not have, and yet you did, and it said more than anyone in my boardroom has said in months. Sofia gripped her mop tighter. It was just a thought, I did not mean anything by it. He studied her for a long moment, then said words that made her world tilt. Marry me. The mop slipped from her hands, clattering loudly on the polished floor. Excuse me? Alexander's jaw tightened. I need a wife, not for love, for a contract. A merger worth billions requires stability, a partner at my side, and I do not trust anyone in my circle. But you write truths no one dares to speak. Sofia's breath caught. This was madness. She was just a cleaning lady. Her hands smelled of bleach. Her shoes were worn thin. Her rent overdue. And here was a millionaire, looking at her as if she were the missing piece in his calculated world. I do not even know you, she whispered. You will, he replied. Think of it as a business arrangement. You help me secure the deal, and I will make sure every debt and struggle in your life disappears. The storm outside rattled the glass, but the silence between them was louder. Sofia felt the weight of her entire life pressing against her chest. This was not a fairy tale. This was a transaction. And yet, beneath the coldness of his offer, she glimpsed something else. A man who carried emptiness, hidden behind tailored suits and skyscraper views. Her hand brushed against her notepad, the same one that had betrayed her heart's honesty days before. Could she really sign her dignity away for survival? Or was this the strangest beginning of something real? And that night, standing in the gleaming lobby with water dripping from her mop, Sofia Alvarez's world changed forever. Sofia could not sleep that night. She lay awake in her small basement apartment, the sound of pipes rattling above her and the hum of the old refrigerator filling the silence. The words replayed in her head again and again. Marry me. Think of it as a business arrangement. She pressed her palms against her face. She was 24 years old, still paying off her community college classes 1 month late, still carrying her mother's medical debt like a shadow. And now, a man worth more than she could ever imagine was offering to wipe it all away with a single contract. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from her younger brother, Matteo. Sis, the landlord came by again. He says if Mom's late one more time, he will throw us out. Her chest tightened. Their mother's arthritis had worsened. Her part-time sewing job was no longer enough to keep food on the table. Sofia was the one holding everything together with frayed strings. By morning, her mind was exhausted. She dragged herself back to the high-rise tower, mop bucket squeaking against the floor. The lobby sparkled with gold accents and marble, but she felt invisible among the polished shoes and tailored suits passing by. When the elevator doors slid open, Alexander Steele was already there, waiting as if he had known she would come. Have you thought about it? His voice was calm, but his gaze was sharp, unyielding. Sofia swallowed hard. It is insane. You do not even know me. I am just a cleaning lady. Alexander's jaw flexed. That is exactly why. You are not part of this world. You do not want my money, my power, or my name. You wrote one sentence, and it told me more about you than all the shallow promises I hear every day. I need someone who does not play the game. Her hands tightened on the mop handle. And what do I get, Mr. Steele? Your debt's gone, your family secure, an apartment far better than the one you live in now. And when the contract ends, freedom. You can walk away with your dignity and your future intact. The elevator chimed. He stepped inside, but his eyes never left her. Think carefully, Sofia. Sometimes the choice that feels impossible is the only one that changes everything. When the doors closed, she was left staring at her reflection in the golden walls of the lobby. For a long moment, she could not move. That evening, she sat at the small kitchen table in her mother's cramped apartment. The air smelled of boiled beans and laundry detergent. Her mother's hands, stiff and swollen, folded around a teacup as she listened. Matteo leaned against the counter, his school backpack at his feet. A millionaire wants to marry you? Matteo repeated, half laughing, half incredulous. That is not even real life, Sophie. Her mother's eyes, weary but sharp, stayed fixed on her daughter. He offered to pay your debts? Sofia nodded slowly. Not just mine, all of ours. The silence that followed was heavy. Her mother set down the cup, her fingers trembling. Mija, I do not want you to sell yourself. Marriage is not supposed to be a transaction. It would not be love, Sofia whispered. It would be a contract. He was very clear about that. But we would not lose the apartment. Matteo could finish school. You could have the treatments you need. Her brother shook his head, pacing the narrow kitchen. It sounds like a trap. Men like that do not do charity. No. Her mother reached for Sofia's hand, squeezing gently. Only you can decide. But remember, dignity is worth more than money. If you do this, make sure you do not lose who you are. Later that night, Sofia sat alone on the balcony, the city lights flickering like distant stars. She opened her notepad and wrote a single question. What is the price of survival? The next morning, Alexander's black car was waiting outside the cleaning staff entrance. The driver held the door open. Inside, Alexander sat in silence, a silver pen in his hand and a folder of documents resting on the seat beside him. When she climbed in, he slid the folder toward her. These are the terms, he said. 3 public events over the next 6 months. Appearances together at the charity gala, the shareholder dinner, and my cousin's wedding. No romantic obligations. No shared life beyond what is necessary for the deal. You remain free in every other way. Sofia flipped through the pages, her fingers shaking. At the back was a blank line waiting for her signature. She closed her eyes, hearing her mother's voice in her head. Do not lose who you are. When she opened them, Alexander was watching her with an expression she could not read. Her hand hovered over the pen. This was not love. This was survival. But survival had always been her battlefield, and as the city roared beyond the tinted glass, Sofia Alvarez lowered the pen to the paper and signed her name. The contract marriage had begun. The signature was still wet on the paper when Sofia realized her life no longer belonged entirely to her. The folder snapped shut in Alexander Steele's hands, his expression unreadable. He slipped the contract into his leather briefcase, then met her eyes with the same calm certainty that had unnerved her from the start. "Now the rules," he said. His voice was low, steady, like he had rehearsed this moment long before she had even walked into his world. They sat across from each other in the back of the sleek car as it glided through the city streets. Outside, neon lights reflected off the glass, but inside was a silence heavy with unspoken weight. "You will attend 3 major events with me," Alexander began. "The Carter Foundation Gala, the annual shareholder dinner, and my cousin's wedding in Napa. At each of these you will be presented as my wife." Sofia's throat tightened. The word wife sounded unreal, like it belonged to someone else's story. He continued, his tone clipped and professional. "There will be no romantic obligations. We will not share a bed. We will not share private life beyond appearances. In public, we play the role. In private, you remain free. That is non-negotiable." Sofia exhaled a breath she had not realized she was holding. At least there were boundaries. At least he was not demanding her soul. "There are 3 rules I expect you to honor," Alexander added, his gaze sharp as a blade. "First, absolute confidentiality. No one outside this contract knows the truth. Second, respect. We do not humiliate one another in public or private. Third, loyalty for the duration. No matter what storms come, you stay until the terms are fulfilled." Her fingers curled around the hem of her coat. "And if I break one of these rules?" His eyes narrowed. "Then the contract is void, and everything I promised, your debts, your family's safety, disappears." The car slowed to a stop in front of a luxury boutique on Fifth Avenue. The driver opened Sofia's door, but she stayed frozen in her seat. Alexander leaned closer, his voice keener now. "Appearances matter in my world. Tomorrow you will walk into the foundation gala not as a cleaning lady, but as my wife. For that, you will need more than a mop and a notebook." "Oh." Inside the boutique, assistants swarmed like bees, pulling gowns from racks, holding up heels that sparkled under the lights. Sofia stood awkwardly in the center, her calloused hands twitching at her sides. She had never worn anything more expensive than a thrift store dress. Now fabric worth more than her rent was draped over her shoulders. Alexander sat in a leather chair, watching as if he were assessing a new acquisition. "The black silk," he said finally. "It suits her." The stylist spun Sofia toward the mirror. For a moment, she did not recognize the woman staring back. Her dark hair swept into an elegant bun, her frame wrapped in silk that shimmered with every movement. The girl who scrubbed office floors at night was gone, replaced by someone who could stand at the side of a millionaire without looking out of place. Her cheeks flushed. She hated that a part of her felt seen. When the fitting was done, Alexander rose, smoothing his tie. "Tomorrow night, you stand beside me. Smile when I introduce you. Say little, listen more, and remember the rules." Back at her apartment, Sofia placed the gown carefully on the only chair she owned, its satin folds glowing under the weak lamp. She looked down at her hands, rough from bleach and soap, and wondered how they would look clutching Alexander Steele's arm in front of hundreds of strangers. Her phone buzzed again. Mateo had sent a picture of their mother asleep on the couch, her swollen hands resting in her lap. Underneath was a message, "Thank you, Sophie. Whatever you are doing, it is helping." Tears blurred Sofia's vision. She pressed the phone to her chest. Whatever doubts she had, whatever fear twisted in her stomach, she reminded herself why she had signed that paper. This was not about fairy tales or silk gowns. This was survival. And as the city lights flickered outside her window, Sofia whispered to herself, "You will not lose who you are." But deep down, she already felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Tomorrow, the masquerade would begin, and with it, the first cracks in the walls Alexander Steele had built around his heart. The ballroom glowed under crystal chandeliers, golden lights spilling across polished marble floors. Waiters in white gloves drifted like shadows between tables set with silver and crystal. The Carter Foundation Gala was the kind of event Sofia Alvarez had only seen in glossy magazines abandoned in subway stations. Now she stood in the center of it, her hand resting nervously on the arm of Alexander Steele. Every eye seemed to follow them as they walked through the entrance. Sofia's gown shimmered with each step, but beneath the silk her knees felt weak. She had practiced her smile in the mirror 100 times, but now it felt glued in place. fragile and stiff. Alexander leaned closer, his voice low enough only she could hear. Relax. They can smell fear like sharks. Her lips parted, but no words came. He did not slow his pace. He moved with the ease of a man born into wealth, every stride commanding the room. Sofia tried to match him, her fingers clutching his arm tighter than she meant to. He did not pull away. At the first table, Alexander introduced her to a group of men in tailored suits and women wearing diamonds heavy enough to sink a ship. This is my wife, Sofia Steele. The title jolted through her like a spark. She forced herself to nod politely, to murmur greetings. A woman with sharp eyes and a glass of champagne tilted her head. I do not think I have seen you before, Sofia. Which family are you with? Sofia's heart pounded. Her throat went dry. But Alexander cut in smoothly, his hand covering hers. She is with me. That is all that matters. His tone left no room for further questions. The woman's painted smile faltered, and she looked away. As the night unfolded, Sofia felt herself pulled from one introduction to another. Investors, politicians, board members. Each handshake tested her resolve. Each smile, a mask she had to hold. Alexander remained close, his presence steady, his gaze flicking toward her whenever she faltered. At one point, a young reporter cornered her near the buffet table. Mrs. Steele, can I ask, what cause are you most passionate about? Her breath caught. She had no script for this. But then she remembered the soup kitchen where she had once eaten dinner after a double shift, the children huddled in line with empty eyes. The hungry, she said quietly. No one should go to bed without food, especially children. The reporter blinked, surprised, then scribbled furiously in his notebook. Sofia's cheeks burned, but when she glanced toward Alexander, she caught the faintest curve of his lips. Approval. Later, as the orchestra played and couples drifted to the dance floor, Alexander turned to her. We should dance. Eyes are watching. Her stomach twisted. I do not know how. He guided her onto the floor anyway, his hand firm at her waist. Follow me. The music swelled, a slow waltz. She stepped clumsily, nearly stumbling on her heel, but his grip steadied her. For a moment, surrounded by glittering gowns and murmured laughter, the noise faded. It was just his hand, his steady breath, the faint scent of cedar, and something darker. You are doing better than you think, he murmured. Her eyes flicked up to meet his. For the first time, his gaze softened, and she saw not the ruthless businessman, but a man carrying loneliness like an invisible weight. The song ended. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Alexander released her hand, his expression returning to Steele. But something had shifted, something small and dangerous. As the evening wound down, Sofia stepped onto the balcony for air. The city stretched before her, lights glittering against the night sky. She pressed her palms to the cool railing, trying to steady herself. Behind her, footsteps. Alexander joined her, his presence filling the silence. For a while, he said nothing. Then, softly, You surprised me tonight. Oh. She turned, startled. Surprised you? You spoke with conviction. You carried yourself with grace. I expected you to break under the weight of this room, but you did not. Sofia's chest tightened. I was terrified. His eyes lingered on her, unreadable in the shadows. Fear is not weakness. It is proof you have something to lose. For a moment, the storm of his world seemed to quiet, and she almost believed there could be something human beneath the contract. But then he straightened, the mask sliding back into place. Come, tomorrow we begin preparations for the shareholder dinner. And remember the rules, Sofia. Always the rules. As they returned inside, Sofia felt the lines of their agreement blur. She had entered this world to survive, not to feel. Yet somewhere between the chandeliers and the city lights, she realized survival was no longer the only thing at stake. The shareholder dinner was nothing like the gala. The gala had been a spectacle of gowns and champagne, a celebration dressed in silk. The shareholder dinner was sharper, colder, a battlefield in disguise. Long tables stretched across the grand hall of the Steele corporate headquarters, lined with crystal glasses and portfolios. Men and women who controlled millions leaned in with calculating eyes, their smiles thin and watchful. Sofia entered on Alexander's arm once again. Her gown, a deep navy chosen to appear dignified but not ostentatious. She felt the weight of their stares immediately. Every whisper seemed to slice through the air. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why her? Alexander's grip on her hand tightened as if he sensed her unease. He leaned down, his voice just for her. "Remember the rules. You are my wife tonight. Stand tall. Do not let them see you doubt." She forced herself to breathe. This was not about her. This was about survival, about her family's safety, about keeping her promise. The dinner began with polite speeches, but it did not take long for the tension to rise. A silver-haired board member named Whitmore stood, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Mr. Steele, we congratulate you on your recent marriage. But I must ask, how does a woman with no background in finance or society add value to this company's image? Investors look for stability. They expect credibility." A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Sofia's cheeks burned. She wanted to disappear into the floor. But Alexander did not flinch. He rose slowly, his hand brushing hers as if to anchor her. "My wife is not here for appearances," Alexander said, his voice calm, steady. "She is here because she understands something most of us forget. Integrity, humanity, the very values this company was founded on." Whitmore chuckled, shaking his head. "That is a romantic notion, Alexander, but markets do not run on ideals." Before she realized what she was doing, Sofia rose to her feet. Her heart pounded, her throat dry, but her voice carried through the hall. "Markets may not run on ideals, sir, but people do. And without people, without trust, no company survives for long." The room stilled, dozens of eyes locked on her. For a moment, she wanted to shrink under the weight of it. But then she thought of her mother's swollen hands, her brother's tired eyes, and she stood straighter. "I may not understand your financial reports," she continued, "but I do understand that every empire collapses when it forgets the people who built it. Maybe I am just a cleaning lady, but cleaning has taught me something: every stain ignored grows deeper until it ruins the whole floor. Integrity is not decoration. It is the foundation." The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Then, slowly, applause began. Not from everyone, but from enough voices to matter. The sound spread, filling the hall. Alexander's gaze never left her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with something she had never seen before. When the dinner ended, Sofia stepped into the quiet corridor, her hands shaking. She leaned against the wall, her breath unsteady. Footsteps approached. Alexander appeared, his tie loosened, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "You broke the rules," he said quietly. Her chest tightened. "I am sorry. I should not have spoken." He shook his head. "No, you broke the rules and saved me." For the first time, his hand reached for hers, not as part of a contract, but as if he needed the contact. His thumb brushed her knuckles, lingering. "You reminded them why this company exists, and you reminded me of something I had forgotten." Sofia's breath caught. In his eyes, the steel walls she had seen since the first night flickered, cracked. For a heartbeat, she saw the man beneath the boy who had built an empire but lost himself in the process. "Do not mistake me," Alexander added quickly, pulling back just enough to shield himself. "The contract still stands. The rules remain. But tonight, you were extraordinary." Sofia looked at him, her heart unsteady. She had stepped into this world for survival, for her family. She had promised herself she would not feel, and yet, standing in the quiet corridor of a skyscraper filled with power and shadows, she realized something terrifying. For the first time, she did not want to walk away when the contract ended. The days following the shareholder dinner carried a strange new rhythm. Sofia still woke in her modest apartment, still folded her mother's medical bills into her purse, still scrubbed her hands raw with soap after hours of cleaning. Yet when she stepped into Alexander Steele's world, people no longer looked through her as if she were invisible. They looked at her, some with curiosity, some with skepticism, but always with recognition. She was no longer just the cleaning lady, she was his wife. Alexander, however, remained an enigma. He was polite, controlled, never cruel, but distant. Their interactions were rehearsed, measured, confined to the rules of the contract, and yet, now and then, something slipped. A glance held too long, a silence that felt heavy with words unsaid. One evening, after a board meeting ran late, Alexander offered to drive her home himself. The car glided through the rain, slick streets, city lights smearing against the windows. For the first time in weeks, there was no driver, no assistant, no barrier between them. "You spoke well at the dinner," Alexander said quietly. eyes fixed on the road. You gave them something I could not. Sofia shifted in her seat. I only told the truth. They wanted to humiliate me. And instead you made them applaud. His jaw tightened. I have spent years building this company, fighting battles with numbers and contracts. But in one sentence, you reminded them of something I had forgotten. She turned toward him, studying his profile in the dim glow of the dashboard. What did you forget? That trust matters more than fear, he admitted, voice almost too soft to hear. My father built an empire by controlling people. I swore I would never be like him, and yet, he trailed off, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. For a long moment, Sofia did not speak. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out her battered notepad. Without a word, she tore a page and wrote in her neat, careful hand, "Power without trust collapses. Integrity is what holds it together." She slid the paper onto the console between them. Alexander's eyes flicked down. His lips parted slightly, as if the words had pierced through his armor. He folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Neither spoke for the rest of the drive, but something unspoken filled the silence, something heavier than the storm outside. The next week, Alexander took Sofia to his estate on the Hudson River. The mansion loomed like a fortress, its tall windows reflecting the gray sky. Inside, it was pristine, filled with art and antiques, but lifeless. Rooms that should have carried laughter and warmth stood silent. "Do you live here alone?" Sofia asked as they walked through the vast hall. "Yes," Alexander replied simply. His voice echoed in the emptiness. "It is easier that way." Sofia paused, her hand brushing the edge of a framed photograph on the wall. A boy with bright eyes stood beside a stern-faced man. The boy was Alexander, no more than 12, the man she did not recognize. "My father," Alexander said, his voice clipped. "He taught me that weakness destroys men, that love is a liability." Sofia turned to him, her heart tightening. "And you believed him?" His gaze locked on hers, unflinching. "I had to. Believing otherwise cost me too much." For the first time since signing the contract, Sofia saw a fracture in him, a crack in the polished steel. She wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to tell him that love was not weakness. But the rules echoed in her mind. No intimacy, no blurred lines. That night, she lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ornate ceiling. She thought of his loneliness, of the boy in the photograph who had grown into a man wrapped in armor. And she thought of herself, a woman who had promised to stay untouched by feelings. But feelings had already begun to grow, slow and dangerous, like roots beneath stone. The following morning, Alexander joined her in the sunlit garden, his expression unusually unreadable. He handed her a small velvet box. "What is this?" she asked, her voice catching. "Our marriage is a contract," he said. "But the world expects symbols. Wear it. It will make the performance believable." Sofia opened the box. Inside lay a diamond ring, its brilliance almost blinding. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. The stone was worth more than everything she had ever owned combined. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. "It is beautiful." Alexander's eyes lingered on her, darker than she had ever seen them. "It is only a symbol," he said, but the way his voice faltered told her it was something more. When the ring slid onto her finger, Sofia felt the contract tighten around her like chains. But at the same time, a spark she could not name flickered inside her. The masquerade was no longer just for survival. It was becoming something far more dangerous. The illusion could not last forever. By the time the wedding in Napa arrived, whispers had already started to crawl through Alexander Steele's world. Some board members muttered that his marriage was too sudden, too convenient. Others began digging for proof that Sofia Alvarez was not who she seemed. The vineyard stretched wide under the California sun, rows of grapes glowing gold. Guests in designer suits and dresses filled the terrace, their laughter sharp as glass. Sofia stood at Alexander's side, her gown pale cream, her ring glinting in the light. She smiled when introduced. She nodded politely. She held his arm as if it had always been hers. But the mask cracked when she caught sight of a familiar face across the crowd. Eleanor Whitmore, the wife of the board member who had doubted her, leaned in close to another guest, her lips curved in a smirk. A folded paper exchanged hands. A photograph slipped into view, grainy but clear enough. It was Sofia in her cleaning uniform, mop in hand, head bent as she worked in the skyscraper hallway. Her chest tightened. Her secret was no longer a secret. During the reception, a toast was called. Glasses clinked, and then Eleanor's voice cut through the hum, sharp and cold. To Mr. Steele and his lovely wife, a union that proves even the humblest beginnings can lead to extraordinary arrangements. Several heads turned. A murmur spread, quick and poisonous. Someone whispered, "She was a janitor." Another, "It was a contract, was it not?" Sofia's stomach dropped. The room spun with heat and shame. She looked to Alexander, expecting denial, expecting his mask to cover the crack. But his expression hardened, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on Eleanor. "That is enough," he said, his voice slicing the air like a blade. Eleanor arched a brow, feigning innocence. "Oh? I thought honesty was what your wife valued most. Or does integrity only apply when it suits you?" The crowd erupted with murmurs again, the tension snapping like a taut wire. Sofia felt exposed, stripped of every fragile piece of dignity she had built in silk and smiles. For the first time since signing the contract, doubt thundered inside her. She had believed she could hold her place here, that her words and strength could earn her a measure of respect. But now, her past was dragged into the light, and all they saw was a cleaning lady who had married her way into wealth. She whispered, "Alexander, they know." His gaze flicked to her, and for a brief moment the mask dropped. His hand closed around hers, firm and grounding. "Let them know," he said, his voice steady. But Sofia pulled back, her chest heaving. "This is your world, not mine, and now they will destroy us both." "Ho!" She fled the terrace. The sound of voices chasing her into the vineyard rose. The California sun felt heavy, the gold light mocking. Tears stung her eyes as she sank against a wooden post, gasping for breath. Behind her, footsteps. Alexander's voice carried low but fierce. "Do not run from them, Sofia. They are not the ones who decide your worth." She turned, trembling. "But you lied. You let them believe. And I let myself believe, too." For the first time, the armor in his gaze cracked wide open. "Yes, I lied. I thought this would be nothing more than a transaction. I thought I could control it. But I was wrong. Somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as part of a contract. I saw you." Her breath caught, torn between fury and a hope she did not want to feel. And as the sun dipped lower over the vineyard, Sofia realized the choice was no longer about survival. It was about whether her heart could survive the truth. The vineyard was quiet now, the laughter of the reception fading into the distance. Sofia stood between the rows of grapes, the California breeze tugging at her gown. Her chest rose and fell in sharp breaths, anger and sorrow twisting together until she could barely tell them apart. Alexander stood a few paces away, his face stripped of its usual control. The mask was gone, and for once he looked like a man rather than a monument of steel. "Sofia," he said, his voice rough, "I cannot change where you came from, but I can choose where we go from here. Let me prove to you that this is more than a contract." Her arms folded tightly across her chest. "Prove it how? With another promise? With another symbol to make me play the part of your wife while people whisper behind my back?" He took a step closer, his tone fierce but desperate. "No, not with words, with action." That night, Sofia did not return to the reception. She left the vineyard quietly, slipping into the car that brought her back to her small apartment. She tore the diamond ring from her finger and laid it on the kitchen table beside her worn notebook. For hours she stared at it, the stone brilliant against the scratched wood, a reminder of the life she had borrowed but did not belong to. 2 days later, the city awoke to a surprise. The Steele Gallery, an exclusive exhibition hall usually reserved for renowned artists, had opened its doors to an event announced only hours earlier. On the banners hung outside were the words, "The Art of Sofia Alvarez." Sofia arrived with her mother and brother, confused and hesitant, pulled forward by an invitation sent under Alexander's name. Inside, the gallery walls glowed under spotlights. But instead of polished masterpieces, sketches lined the room her sketches. The pages torn from her battered notebook, each one carefully framed. Notes she had written to herself in moments of exhaustion, small drawings of subway strangers, quick reflections on truth, trust, and dignity. She froze, her throat closed. This was her soul on display, the pieces of herself she had hidden between mop buckets and night shifts. And here they were, treated as if they mattered. Alexander stepped forward from the crowd. No suit and tie tonight, only a simple black shirt. His voice carried through the hall, steady but vulnerable. "These are Sofia's words, her truth, The first note she left on my desk reminded me of the man I wanted to be. And every note since has reminded me that leadership is not built on fear. It is built on humanity. Without her, I had forgotten that. Sofia's eyes burned with tears. "Why would you do this?" she whispered. "Because I needed to show you. Not the board, not the shareholders, not the world. You." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "The contract is nothing to me now. The only vow I want is the one you choose freely. Not for debts, not for appearances, not for survival. For us." The room fell silent, every guest watching. But in that moment, the crowd did not matter. It was only Sofia and Alexander, her trembling hands pressed to her chest, his words hanging heavy in the air. She had entered his world as a ghost, a nameless worker with nothing but a mop and a notebook. Now she stood in a gallery filled with her voice, her heart, her truth. And for the first time, she believed he truly saw her. The gallery lights glowed like stars, each frame carrying a fragment of Sofia's life. For the first time, she felt no shame in the calluses on her hands, no fear in the whispers that had once followed her. Here, her words were not hidden in the margins of a notebook. They were honored. They were hers. Alexander stepped closer, his voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I married you because I thought I needed an illusion. I thought a contract could shield me from the world, but you gave me something I never expected. You gave me truth, you gave me courage, and you gave me love before I even understood what it meant." Sofia shook her head, tears spilling freely. "You cannot know that, Alexander. What we began was a lie, a performance. I was never supposed to mean anything more to you." His eyes held hers, unwavering. "And yet you do. You mean everything. Contracts can end, appearances fade, wealth can vanish. But what I feel when I am with you, there is no ledger for that. There is no rule strong enough to contain it." He sank to one knee in the center of the hall. Gasps rippled through the crowd. From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box, not the same one that had once carried the cold symbol of their arrangement, but a new one, plain and unadorned. Inside lay a simple gold band. "This ring is not part of a contract. It is not a performance. It is my heart, and it is my choice. Sofia Alvarez, will you marry me for real? Will you walk beside me not as part of an arrangement, but as my partner, my equal, my love?" The silence was thick with anticipation. Sofia's heart hammered in her chest. She looked around the room at her mother wiping tears, at Mateo standing tall with pride, at strangers watching with softened eyes. Then she looked back at Alexander, the man who had begun as her employer, her bargain, her impossible escape route, and now knelt before her stripped of armor, offering only himself. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "Yes, Alexander. Not for survival, not for debts, not for appearances. Yes, because somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you too." Applause erupted. The gallery filled with sound, but Alexander heard only her. He slid the band onto her finger, rose to his feet, and kissed her. This time not for an audience, not for a deal, but for the truth that had finally broken through the walls around them both. Later, their wedding was small, intimate, far from the grandeur of ballrooms and contracts. In a quiet garden with family and a few trusted friends, Sofia wore a simple dress, Alexander a dark suit. As they exchanged vows, he whispered, "Best mistake I ever made." She smiled, her hand tightening around his. "No mistake, just fate." Ugh. And as the sun set, casting gold light across their joined hands, Sofia Alvarez, once a cleaning lady who left forgotten notes, became Sofia Steele, wife by choice, partner by love, and proof that dignity and kindness could rewrite even the coldest of contracts.